And give a hand to Andy and the entire Orbit Media team as well for a fantastic event. So let's get started talking about generative AI. Fair warning, if you're viewing this presentation, the video of it after November 7th, everything is wrong. It's out of date. I kid you not, I was updating slides like 20 minutes ago. That's how fast these things change. As Andy said, you can't sneeze without hitting something about generative AI. If you're unfamiliar, is there anyone who has not tried a generative AI tool out of curiosity? Okay. It's okay if you know, there's like probably one person. So you're familiar. Bing, ChatGPT and Bard, Google search generative experiments, which we're going to see a lot of today, Microsoft Bing, Anthropic's Claude, open source tools like LM Studio. These are all sort of the basic interfaces. When you hear the word model, when we're talking about AI, what it really means is a piece of software. If Microsoft Word is a piece of software written by humans for humans, a model is a piece of software written by AI for AI. And so that's all it is. And the reason we want to know this is because what's happening in the space is we're getting to an evolution where the interface, what we use to talk to AI, is different than the underlying model. We can change them out. And we'll talk about which models to use and when a lot later on. But you can see there's things like ChatGPT and Bing and Bard and stuff. Those are the interfaces. It's like the steering wheel of the car. And you have the lovely models there, which you can tell were not named by marketers. So what are these things? We actually used to call them large language models. As of 2 weeks ago, we are now starting to refer to them as large multimodal models because these things are evolving very, very quickly. But fundamentally, language models start off with this quote from John Rupert Firth from 1957 saying that you shall know a word by the company it keeps. Right? All language is statistics. All language is mathematics in some ways because when you say words, you're not saying them in in a random order. You're saying them in a predictable sequence. If I say I'm brewing the tea, right? If for North American English speakers, this probably means I'm making a beverage with hot water and a dried leaf. Changing one word can change the meaning of other words because of the way words co-occur together. If I say I'm spilling the tea, now I've changed one word and it changes the meaning of the other words in the sentence. That's how statistics work. And so these language models are constructed by understanding the statistical relationships of one word to the next, of one phrase to the next, of one paragraph to the next, of one document to the next. How do these things work? This is the unhelpful version. This is from 2017, the paper by Google called Attention is All You Need. The mathematics are not terribly important, but the way these things are constructed is that companies take giant amounts of text and essentially look at representations. They look at how often do words appear near each other. If I say the word Starbucks, there's probably going to be the word coffee nearby, right? It's probably not going to be OnlyFans. It's probably not going to be a word that occurs near Starbucks a whole lot. Maybe, depends on who you follow. If you think about a piece of text as a pizza and a model as a cookbook, if you were to construct a model, let's say you wanted to go and eat and to learn pizza in its entirety, right? You'd start in Chicago, of course. And then you go all around the world and eat every pizza and take notes on it. And when you were done, you would know all there is to know about pizza, right? And anybody who came to you and said, hey, what about putting mushrooms and pineapple on a pizza? Now, 40% of the room will yell immediately, pineapple doesn't belong on pizza. About 40% will argue that it does. But regardless, you have eaten so much pizza that you know and you can create and generate any kind of pizza because you've seen it all. You've been to Japan where you've had creamed corn and squid pizza, right? So you know exactly what this thing is. That's what these models are. They have seen so much text and images and video and motion that they've built these massive associations. That's why they can do what they can do, because essentially they've pretty much seen it all. They're like humanity's largest mirror. We interface with them with what's called prompt engineering, which is a form of programming. This is a really important thing to remember. You are a programmer now. You are a developer now. The moment you type a prompt into these things, you are writing code. It just so happens that the code you're writing is in natural language, but you're still programming, right? You shall know a word by the company it keeps. Imagine a word and the associations around it. If you're familiar with word clouds, right? If I say B2B, there's a bunch of words that occur. If I say marketing, there's a bunch of words that you think of immediately, and yet these two words have these clouds around them. If we put them together statistically, there are words that occur around both. right? And that when you type a prompt, every word you type in this prompt is creating these word clouds, and the machine is looking for the intersections of all those clouds. Now, this toy example has like 10 words on it. When you're doing it inside these models, there's thousands of words associated to every word that you type. So if I go to a language model and I give it a short prompt, write a short paragraph about how AI is being used in marketing. When people say AI isn't creative, it's because the prompt wasn't creative. That prompt has so few words in it that you just have very small word clouds, right? And the intersections are very generic. What do you get? Generic output. You get boring content, not original content, because it's so limited. The machine can only pull from a few word clouds. If I increase the length of the prompt, more words, more word clouds, more intersections, better content. Right? If I go nuts and I say, you're an AI expert, you know, AI, machine learning, blah, 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 you know, all these things, I give it a ton of words, every word and phrase creates these intersecting word clouds, and the content you get is better content. It's much more original. It's much more precise and focused, because now you're starting to get those weird little overlaps in all these word clouds that don't occur normally in just the big ones. This is the key takeaway for prompt engineering. The more relevant words you use, the better your prompts will perform. The more relevant words you use, the better your prompts will perform. And by the way, if you want the slides, all the slides are at wherecanIgettheslides.com. Here's a prompt structure that we recommend for most public language models. So ChatGPT, Bing, Bard, etc. It's called RACE, Role, Action, Context, Execute. 4 parts to a prompt. So you are a Google Analytics certified professional. You know Google Analytics 4, Google Tag Manager, Google Looker Studio, etc. BigQuery. Your first task is to examine this channel grouping data and analyze the overall composition of site traffic. You'll be analyzing for marketing channel density. Already, we've got a lot of words there. Then we've got the context, the actual data, because these tools have seen data in these formats and can understand what it is. And then the execution statement, analyze the composition of the site traffic and provide recommendations in bullet point format for the marketers and next steps to increase traffic. Role, action, context, execute. When you do this, you get really good outputs. You get an analysis. You get specific marketing recommendations from the data. Now, the big models have some ability to do reasoning, some ability to think, to the point where they can put together really decent starting points for your outputs. There's a PDF if you want to download this structure. There's not even a form to fill out. Go to trustinsights.ai/prompt sheet for that if you'd like to hang it up in a cubicle. So let's talk use cases. Here's the problem with use cases with language models and multimodal models. What job or task in your company does not use language? Right? There isn't a single one. From the janitor to the CEO, everybody uses language in some capacity, which means that the number of use cases are literally infinite. Right? If it uses language, AI can be used for it. So there's 6 categories then of use cases. There's generation, extraction, summarization, rewriting, classification, and question answering. Those are the 6 broad categories that you can use these tools for. And let's step through each of these. So generation, we already know this, right? Write me a blog post. And we've done this ad nauseum. There's really nothing to explain here. You can generate pretty much any language, any text, right? So I had a client that needed a privacy policy on their website. I told the tool, here's the technologies that we're going to use on this website. It wrote a privacy policy, and then I took it to my human lawyer and said, vet this, make sure the machine did it right. They said yes, for the most part it did. There were a couple little tweaks, but it was generally pretty good to go. They can write code. They can write code in pretty much every language. By the way, if you know anybody who works in industrial or legacy, like old finance and banking, and like your last COBOL programmer just retired, they can write COBOL, right? So you don't have to like hunt for that COBOL program anymore. But programming code is language, right? And so they're really, really good at that. A very, very useful thing to do. One of the topics that came up recently in an SEO forum was about how content itself does not draw as many links as utilities and tools and downloads and things that people find useful. Again, these things write code. The other day I said, hey, I want a WordPress plugin that just puts a banner on my old content and says, hey, this is old. You just be careful. I couldn't find one that I liked, so I said, okay, well, let's try writing one. I was like, how hard can it be to write a WordPress plugin? Turns out not very. I gave it a prompt to GPT-4 using ChatGPT, the paid version, and I said, let's write this plugin. And it took about 15 minutes of back and forth, and then it was done. And then I put it up on GitHub so anyone can get at it. If I wanted to, I could put the plugin on the WordPress codex. Andy, how valuable is WordPress.org if you get links, outgoing links from it?
That is an amazingly valuable link. Money can't buy that. It's take the day off if you get a link from that website.
If you put your plugin that you wrote on the WordPress codex with links back to your site, 15 minutes with ChatGPT, right? Super powerful. If you can think about it, if you can imagine, if you can explain it well, a machine can help you code it and build it. There was this one utility I used to use on my blog that I loved, and it like 4 years ago, the developer just abandoned it. I'm like, well, I like that back. Guess what? It's back because I took the old code and I said, let's update this because it was written like PHP 5, and said, ChatGPT, let's update this to PHP 8, and now I have my favorite tool back. Right? So think about the things that you're paying for as marketers, like all these services, they're all charging you $14.99 a month. How many of them could you use just a tool like this and just write your own code and say, okay, I'm going to stop paying $14.99 a month for something that really doesn't need a subscription? Extraction is the second category. Taking data out of other data. Very easy one. So I took our company's mission statement, all that stuff, and I said, give me an SEO keyword list that is semantically relevant. So it will pull out things from here that are not in our description. Organizational theory consulting is an example. But semantically, it knows that. And then you take this list and you feed it to your search tool of choice, like Ahrefs or SEMrush or Moz, and validate the keyword volumes. But just on the content you already have, you can have it develop keywords. Take customer feedback and use it to develop keywords for your content. This is my favorite use case as an agency. We have a lot of conference calls every week. I don't remember most of what I say. So with permission, we record them, we get transcripts, and then I say to the tools, here's the transcript of the call, give me the meeting notes, and especially give me the action items so that I can remember what it was I said. Because the last thing you want to do is relive the meeting that you just spent 45 minutes of your life on. The tools can do that. The base models, there are tools like Otter that now have it built in. So if you use a tool like Otter, I think there's a few others that do this too. It'll write out the transcript, and then you say, summarize the major points of this transcript. And now you can remember what you did and save yourself an enormous amount of time. If you use Google Bard, it now has rolled out extensions that can do things like read your Gmail for you. So I said here, give me a list of senders so I can see who I haven't answered this week. And it will summarize. It's, again, a very good way to quickly look at what's going on in your life. Summarization is the third use case. Take big things, make them smaller. Summarize what's in my inbox. This is Google's Bard. Again, very simple. A good way to just take a quick peek if you don't want to read through all of your email. One of my favorite use cases, this is for my teacher's martial arts school. I go to school in Boston. And he has a bunch of Google business reviews, a bunch of 5-star reviews. I said, let's write some social media posts based on those reviews. So take all the text out of the reviews, put it into a language model, say, write content from this. This works really well because this is using the voice of the customer. As marketers, we've been giving lip service to the voice of the customer for 20 years, and we don't actually listen to the customer because there's too much data. But now with this, we can say, okay, now write content using the voice of the customer, and it works better because it's what real people say. As a marketer, we'll say, oh, we have a flexible, scalable, turnkey, integrated solution. No one talks like that except us, right? So this will use the real words. And what's really powerful about it is sometimes customers will say things about us that we wouldn't say ourselves, right? For one reason or another. If you, by the way, are working on your LinkedIn profile, ask 10 friends to just write about you in general, send you an email, and then have a tool distill it down and write your LinkedIn bio for you. You'll be amazed. Restaurant reviews, ratings, and things like that. So I took 500 reviews. This is synthetic data, but I took 500 reviews of a client and said, okay, summarize what's going on in this customer's reviews. This is a powerful tool for helping customers see for themselves, like, hey, here's what's going on with your organization, right? Your customers don't like that, they have incorrect orders or improperly cooked food. If you've got a lot of customer volume, this is a way to summarize it quickly. This is also a powerful professional development tool. I took recently, I wanted to know what was going on in SEO recently. So I took 10 YouTube videos that were published in the last week about Google's recent algorithm change, fed them to a tool called Whisper, which is from OpenAI, transcribes it, and then fed that into, I used Anthropic's Claude and said, summarize all these videos, because that's 3.5 hours of video. I really don't want to watch 3.5 hours of video. And in about 10 minutes, I had 30 bullet points of what's new in SEO. And some really interesting things, like I didn't realize the guy who's heading up the development of Bing's integration had some very specific recommendations for how to use your content, how to rewrite your content to favor the way Bing integrates with ChatGPT, which is kind of cool. So that's summarization. Think about any topic that you have. Think about even today's conference. When you get the videos from this conference, maybe just transcribe them all, and then you can distill down each session and you hand it to your coworkers. Rewriting is the fourth superpower. I got this NDA from this guy, and I looked at the NDA, and I'm like, did you copy this off of Reddit? Right? Were you drunk? It was so bad. It turns out both were true. I said, rewrite this NDA properly, and so the tools did it. I handed it to my lawyer, and my lawyer said, thank God you didn't sign that first one because it was unenforceable and he was drunk. Here's a proper NDA. Any kind of contract things, you want to use these tools to take a look at them. They are tools that can teach you. So in AI, there's this concept called model parameters and model weights, and there's a huge amount of math that very few people like associated with them. When you read the papers about them, they just kind of slide off your brain. So I said, explain this to me in terms of pizza. And it said, model parameters are the variety of ingredients on the top of a pizza. Model weights are how much of each ingredient there is. Like, oh, now I understand this topic. If there's any concept that you don't understand, ask these tools to reframe it in a context that you do understand. Maybe you like golf. Maybe you like acting. Maybe you like sushi. These tools can rephrase it in a way that will fit into your brain. I'm sure, Jay, we could even have these things do it in forms of some tequilas, like comparing machine learning models. Huh? Rewriting things. Bob, you sent over 2 months of invoices in one day. Of course it's not done. It's not going to be done anytime soon because this stuff takes time. And if you needed it sooner, you should have let it sit on your effing desk for 2 weeks. You can F right off and you'll get it. When you get it, go F yourself, Karen, and accounting. Rewrite the following memo in a professional tone. Dear Bob, I hope this message finds you well. Now, you can debate whether the first memo would get better results or not, but it will probably also get you fired. If there's things that you want to write that will get you fired, write it to a language model and have it help coach you. But that's rewriting. Classification is the fifth tool. So, hey, here's this article. Categorize it. If you've inherited a blog and you've got a lot of content that you need to organize, maybe the previous owner didn't do tags and categories, right? So you have to categorize this thing. Feed it through programmatically and have it categorize your blog. And then you can match that up with your Google Analytics data and see what topics perform the best. And oh, by the way, if you've got a good web analysis software, do this with your competitors. What are the topics that they blog about? Pull their volumes from the search tool of your choice and compare and see what topics do they get the most traction on. You can do personality analysis. So this is a transcript. I took a transcript of a call I had with a new customer client, and I said, analyze this person's personality in the big 5 traits, and it spit out this analysis, which is actually fairly accurate. I got to know this person. It's reasonably accurate. What's really cool about this is that you can think about how does this match up with the people that we would want to be working with. If you were in sales and you were handing off a new account to your service team, and you knew that you had a point of contact that was super introverted, for example, should you hand them off to the customer service manager who is the most extroverted? Probably not, right? So even personality analysis can be useful for figuring out how to handle and deal with people. And last is question answering, being able to ask questions of your data, right? You can do general stuff like, I was asking if I can import body armor into the EU, and turns out most of the time you can't. But what's really powerful is when you're loading in documents you want to ask questions to. So this is an NDA. I wanted to know if I should sign it or not. I listed the things I care about, and it told me, in this case, yeah, maybe not sign this NDA. And then you can have the AI rewrite this as a bunch of red lines and send it back. How many of you have had the joy of reading through RFPs? Isn't that fun? That's a good use of your time. You write a list of 5 things that you care about in an RFP response. You hand it to the machine and say, does this RFP meet these qualifications? And you're done. Right? Saves you hours. Andy's going to show this one in much greater detail. Now with vision models, I took a full-page screenshot on my website and said, you're a UI UX expert. Tell me what I'm doing wrong with my website. And it looks at it and it spits out a whole bunch of things like, hey, these are all the things that you're doing wrong. Now, I may or may not go to fix them, but at least I have a good analysis of it as a starting point to say, okay, these things can see, right? They can look at stuff. I loaded an X-ray of a knee joint into one of these things, said, give me an analysis. It did a bone density analysis, it did a cartilage analysis, and said, here's the things that are going on. So when should you use AI? We used to have this long, complicated formula. Now the answer is always. This was the BCG study that Andy referenced earlier. This was a paper that was released by BCG and Harvard Business Review. Those consultants finished 12% more tasks, completed tasks 25% faster, and produced 40% higher quality results. Now these are like elite knowledge workers. These are not people who are just copying and pasting into Google Sheets. The fact that BCG got 12% more work out of them at 25% faster pace is pretty incredible. When it comes to creativity, Nature magazine had this study for divergent creativity. Machines are, on average, more creative than humans. Machines, on average, are more creative than humans. Now, there are still humans that outpace the machines, right? The most creative people can outpace the most creative machines. But it turns out the paper said, unfortunately, in this study with, I forget, it was like 500 people. Unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of people with really bad ideas. So what you want to do is do an inventory. Are you going to work on AI that is tasks that are inside your company, internal, or external, that are customer facing? And then are you going to look at optimizing your processes or bringing on new things? Take some time to think through all the tasks that you go through every day that are especially repetitive, and organize them on just a simple 2x2 matrix to figure out where you might want to start. And then do your usual level of effort and start picking off these tasks one at a time to find more time in your day. Now, there are risks to these things. There's a few of them. One, this is the warning label on OpenAI's product. We found that our models more strongly associate European American names with positive sentiment when compared with African American names, and negative stereotypes with black women. This is a problem. If you have a customer service chatbot, for example, and I use my American name and I use my Korean name, should I get the same service? Yes. Will I? Maybe. Right? So you want to, if you're going to have these things be public facing in any capacity, you're really going to want to check these things out and make sure that they behave properly in extensive testing first. There are issues with copyright. In the USA, machine-made content cannot be copyrighted. In the USA, machine-made content cannot be copyrighted. So if you use a tool to create a blog post and you put it up on your blog, a competitor can copy and paste the whole thing onto their blog with no legal consequences, because machine-made content cannot be copyrighted. It's based off of a ruling from 2018 called Naruto versus Slater, when a chimpanzee took a selfie. The court ruled chimpanzees are not human. The chimpanzee did the work. The work cannot be copyrighted because only humans can hold copyright, and that's extended to machines. However, there's a wrench in the spanner. The wrench is there are countries where machine content can be copyrighted. The UK, Ireland, New Zealand, India, Hong Kong. Machines can hold copyright in those nations. So where your content comes from can be a big deal depending on how multinational you are. On the flip side, there's a bunch of cases right now about whether using training data, whether these companies that make these models have violated copyrights by using artists' stuff. That's not resolved in US law. And it probably won't be for years. However, the EU has already ruled that it does violate copyright. Japan has ruled that it does not violate copyright. So we have this lovely legal stew of confusion around these things. So just be aware, if you're risk averse, you may want to actually build your own or use companies whose models are certified, like we're not using stuff we don't have permission to. Adobe's Firefly, for example. Adobe has trained their vision models solely on stuff that they have rights to, so they don't have any of these issues. Regulation is coming. Probably 2025. And here's why. Because this stuff will be so badly misused in the US election cycle next year, and that the legislation will be inevitable. And when it comes out, the legislation, like all things Congress does, will be completely ineffective. So there's no video. This is not me.
What's real and what's not?
Let's try that again. A text prompt. I gave it a training video and a text prompt, and it generated me in my office from the training video saying that. That's not me. Right? That's a tool called HeyGen. we are going to have problems determining what's real. I did a version of this, but had it make me speak Polish, and it did the lip syncing thing so well that my Polish friends looked at it and said, okay, you're still clearly an American speaking Polish, but you're speaking Polish correctly, right? And it got the French one, it got slightly wrong with some pronouns, but that's it. These tools are bending reality in ways that the average person cannot differentiate. They cannot see the difference between what's real and what's not, right? That is not real. And if you know me at all, you know that there's some things that are wrong with it, but it's so subtle that if you just watch it casually, or if you didn't know me, this would be a problem. So how do we use these things? How do we get them out? 4 stages in your journey: prompt engineering, deployment, tuning models, and app construction. Prompt engineering is pretty straightforward. You've got to learn to use these tools, right? Try using them for everything. Find out what they're bad at. If you are working in a regulated industry, you should be using what are called open source models and a tool like LM Studio, where this runs on your laptop. Data goes nowhere, right? It doesn't go on the internet. It doesn't go to some third party. It's self-contained. This stuff is going to be in every piece of software you use, whether you want it or not. So this is Visual Studio Code. I can right-click on my code and say, what did I screw up? And it will tell me and fix it. Very shortly, for those who use Microsoft Office, you will have Microsoft Copilot, which will take over, which will be a prompt where you can do things like create a presentation from this press release. It will allow Office to interoperate, and you will be using prompts for everything in Office. It will be in Microsoft Windows. You can be like, what is that? Where's that file I left from 2017? And Windows will help you find it with the aid of these tools. Google is rolling out Duet in its workspaces as well. The most important thing that you can do in these early days is build a prompt library. So this can be in any note-taking tool, but you want to keep track of the prompts that you use, not in ChatGPT or the tool of your choice, but in some place where you have control over them, because you want to be able to share them with your team as you find ones that work. Ideally, you can share hold the responses too. So I use a tool called Joplin. You can use Evernote, OneNote. If you're stuck in the 7th circle of hell, you can use SharePoint. But wherever you want to store your data somewhere and hold on to these prompts and share them with your teams. Corollary, this is code. Your prompts are code. Would it be okay at your company if your developers just started posting the code they were writing for your company on LinkedIn, like, hey, look at this cool script I wrote? Probably not. You should not be doing that either, right? Because if you're sharing your code, you're giving away your intellectual property. Ask your legal team about that. Second step is deployment. The prompt library is important because once you find prompts that work well, you're going to want to develop them and turn them into real software. So this is an example. I wrote a prompt that worked well for me for sentiment analysis. I did not want to copy and paste 1,000 things to ChatGPT. That's not fun. So instead, I had the tool help me write some code that would then analyze stuff at scale using that prompt over and over and over and over again. So once you find those prompts that are super high value prompts, you're going to want to have some additional code to deploy them within your enterprise. They'll basically become part of your secret sauce as a company. And for you personally, as you move up in your career, your prompt library is going to be part of your secret sauce as an employee. Right? Think about that. How will you take the tools that you develop with AI and the methods you develop and bring value to other companies? How will you show that in a job interview? Think about it. The third step in your evolution is you'll get to a point where the public models just aren't good enough anymore, and you're going to want custom models that can do one thing really well, so well that it can't do anything else. That's what fine-tuning is. You'll take some form of data, and you're going to essentially take one of these downloadable models and force it to do that thing. So I took all the blog posts that my CEO wrote. I used one of the preparation tools that OpenAI provides, and we made a version of their model that could write like her. It can't do much else, right? Like it can't make Guns N' Roses lyrics into limericks anymore, but it can write like her precisely. Right? So if there's a super high value task that you absolutely positively need to have right every single time, say like a customer service chatbot, you're going to take a model and fine tune it. This is especially important, again, if you're working with sensitive information, sensitive data. I was giving a talk to a major healthcare system's gynecology department, which was super awkward. And they were asking, how do I use medical data? I said, well, you have to keep it in a private application. But you can then take all the case histories that are in your system and basically build a chatbot internally within your network that can answer patients' common questions based on the data and the staff that you have on hand. The more fine-tuned a model is, the shorter the prompt has to be, because we're taking these models and making them good at only one thing. And finally, app construction. This is where sort of the height of your evolution. There are systems and tools, one's called LangChain, there's a bunch of these, that start connecting language models to other pieces of software, because language models are really good at language, and they're really not good at things that are not language, like math. They suck at math. However, you can write code that connects language models to other things. So I was in my hotel room the other day, and I said, I need you to just summarize all the blog posts on my blog. And so I wrote, I had it write the connectors to write a web scraper, to download the content from my blog, to then pass to a language model for summarization, and then to extract it and turn it into this, and then spit it out in a spreadsheet. So you'll be building entire apps with these things. Remember, you are a developer. Everyone is a developer now. How's this going to impact marketing? A recent study on Search Engine Journal, this was a B2B SaaS company that did this, saw a minimum of 18% loss of search traffic to some of their clients' websites. A maximum loss of 64%. Right? So these things are going to have a substantial impact on your SEO. If you go through and ask these things about your company, you'll see, yeah, it'll get stuff right, but there's nothing to click on. There's no traffic being generated. Here's one from Bing. What do you know about my company? I'm the third result. Right? I'm not even going to get traffic from my own name. If you go into ChatGPT, there's nothing. Go to an open model, there's nothing to click on. This is really going to impact unbranded search. So if unbranded search is part of your strategy, what do you know about B2B marketing? There's nothing to click on, and there's a whole bunch of things that it should be on there that are not. Right? Here's some more. There's 4 companies that are going to get some help, and that's about it. Go into ChatGPT, nothing. Go into an open model, nothing. One of the things that you need to do, this is a homework assignment, is go into Google Search Console and Bing Webmaster Tools and just count up what percentage of your search traffic is unbranded. That is at risk. Right? If it's 5%, 50%, 85%, whatever percentage it is, that is the most at risk from these tools. So what are the antidotes? Number 1, if brand building is not part and parcel of your strategy, in fact, if it's not the core of your strategy, it needs to be. Right? Say yes to every podcast that will have you on, even if they have 2 listeners. Say yes to every guest blog post. Say yes to everything that can put more text on the web about you somewhere. Because here's the thing, this is going to completely invert PR strategy. We think about PR as let's get in reputable publications and things. To a language model that's scraping data from the internet, a page on the New York Times is no different than a page on the East Peoria Evening News. Right? So your PR strategy has to flip over to say, I don't care necessarily about the New York, it's nice if you get the New York Times, but if I can get 1 article in the Times, I can get 100 articles over time, a year in the East Peoria Evening News. When the bots come crawling by, the East Peoria Evening News is going to help me more. So flip your PR strategy over to volume. Right? Just get out there somewhere. Second, have a channel that is not intermediated by AI. Email newsletter, easiest win. And as Andy showed earlier, this has been good advice for 23 years. Right? Have an email newsletter that you control where there's not much in the way. Have a text messaging list. Have direct mail. Direct mail is actually effective again, A, because no one sends it, and B, because there's no AI in the way. And 3, have a community of some kind. You're in one right now, but have a digital community of some kind for your customers so that you can talk to them directly. Platforms like Slack. If I was building a community today from scratch, I would start with a platform called Discord. Now, let's answer this question. Who's going to lose their jobs? We heard AI will take away tasks, not jobs. That's kind of true. And even what Paul said is kind of true. A person who's skilled at AI will take the jobs, plural, of people who are not. Because you scale much faster with these tools than without. Go back to 1762. There used to be a job called spinster. That was a person would take fiber and turn it into thread. In that year, the spinning jenny was invented, which essentially did the work of 10 spinning wheels. And so a whole bunch of these spinsters essentially went out of business because one person could replace 10 people who were doing it the old-fashioned way. That's what's going to happen with AI. Now, there will be other ripple effects in the system, right? Because now you have a whole bunch of thread. So now you need more weavers, you need more textile companies, et cetera. But that kind of distortion is coming. In May, when the Writers Guild went on strike, on the May 2nd at 12 o'clock, they went on strike, 12:14 p.m., Got my first inquiry from a studio needing a writer to use some AI to write dialogue. And so companies recognize the value of an employee who is skilled at using AI. And they're going to ask this question more and more. A person who's skilled at AI will take the jobs of people who are not. So what's next? These things are multimodal, right? ChatGPT just rolled out its integration with DALL-E. Now you don't have to mess around with those really weird arcane image prompts. You just say, hey, here's what I want, and it will spit it out. Now, you will then have a conversation with it to refine it, to say, because like this picture said, A, don't make them like looking at the camera, that's weird. B, they're all the same age, let's get some age diversity in there. C, let's get some body type diversity in there and stuff. But at least now you can have conversations with image creation. If you want to check out commercial uses, Coca-Cola has this video called Masterpiece, which is all AI generated. It's really fantastic. Agent networks are becoming the next big thing. These are networks of machines that talk to each other. This one's called GPT Author. You give it a prompt, a decently sized prompt, and it'll write a 15-chapter trashy romance novel. It's not very good. I mean, in general, trashy romance novels are not very good, but this is especially mediocre today. 6 months ago, this was not possible at all. So 6 months from now, we'll probably have trashy romance novels that are appropriately trashy. This is a tool called Silly Tavern, role-playing software. As marketers do, I just ruin everything. And I perverted its use to making it into a focus group. And so now I have Erica Expert, Nellie Novice, and Indigo Intermediate all chatting with each other about the features of Google Analytics. And if I scrape the names off, you would not know these were artificial. These are what real humans have said about Google Analytics. And so if you have some kind of product or service and you want to have a first-pass focus group, you can use an agent network to do that. Fable Studios did this recently. This was fascinating. They built an agent network and had it generate a 22-minute episode of South Park. Soup to nuts. Video, audio, script in 3 hours. They just built this large agent network. Now, it wasn't very funny because they used the ChatGPT engine, and it's heavily censored, so you didn't get your typical South Park humor. But the fact that it did it at all is incredible. And so entertainment in particular is going to have to wrestle with any kind of templated content. Like with these networks, basically The Simpsons will be on forever now. Like The Simpsons will just become a part of reality. There's a huge open source movement, and this is where AI is really going to shine. There are thousands and thousands of developers taking models out there and accelerating the usage, tuning them to be very specific. As fast as like OpenAI and Microsoft and Google can move, the open source community moves faster and develops more tools that are better, faster. And they can do it on relatively inexpensive hardware. The image generation that open source tools now generate is better than what DALL-E can generate. So this is an example of one. And they can be creative. We saw the study earlier with existing tools, but you've heard this term called hallucinations, when they just make stuff up. Folks are realizing this is not necessarily a bug. This is how machines create. And so there's now software that can take these hallucinations, gather them up, harness them, and turn them into things like new product ideas, right? Because say, hey, that was clearly an error, but let's see where that goes. Kind of like Mad Libs. And these things are accessible. They're going to be in everything, right? They're already in Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. Unity announced that it's going to have generative AI capabilities. Every piece of software that you use, if that software developer wants to stay in business, is going to have generative AI capabilities in the next year or less. If you have a laptop that can play Call of Duty at like maximum resolution and not incinerate, you can run these tools on your machine. Right? And that's really the promise of the open source side of things, is you don't have to wait for companies to build this stuff. You can actually run these tools yourself. And finally, these things are going to be integrated. This is a fascinating experiment. Meta has its little metal cap, like that thing from Back to the Future, where you think of something and a generative model will interpret your brainwaves and start building what it thinks you see. Right? It's about 60% accurate right now, but we're going to get to a point where even prompts will be completely unnecessary because we will put on probably the meta cap straight with the Oculus thing and just think of what we want to see and have machines help us create. This, I see some of you shaking your head. Some of this is kind of creepy, but at the same time, think about what this would mean for someone maybe with brain injury, right? How it would allow them to live a more full life. So some final thoughts. This is your starter kit. Here's what you want to do. Here's the model and the tool to map to it. So sensitive information, open source. Writing code, these choices. Analyzing images, Bard or ChatGPT. Creating images, Bing Image Creator or ChatGPT. Writing under 8,000 words, ChatGPT Plus. Writing over 8,000 words, Anthropic's Claude 2. Real-time information, Bing or Bard. Analyzing data, ChatGPT. That's your starter kit. There are tons of software companies and tools out there that have all these solutions. Don't buy them yet. Get good at this stuff first with the starter kit, and then see what they can't do. Last comment. These tools, as Andy pointed out in the keynote, are skill levelers. Right? I can't play music, and you do not want to hear me sing. I can't really paint. I'm a mediocre drawing artist at best. But these tools now allow me to do those things at mediocre to slightly better than mediocre levels. Right? So I have no talent. Now with tools, I have mediocre talent, which means that as they advance, I will slowly get better as well. Once the tools can produce good talent, then I will be a good artist. That means that your value as a human being is the quality and quantity of ideas you can produce. Because these are not sentient, they're not self-aware, they're not autonomous. They rely on you. The quality and quantity of the ideas you produce will dictate your value as a human being. So you have to double down on the things that make you human, and that will also make you much more successful with AI. If you'd like, there's a free book. Again, that's in the slides, and I think that's time.